welcome to Tea Time this week. I would like to introduce you to my friend Jess, who is an occupational therapist from the Foundation. Some of you who watch Tea Time will have seen her before, and we've discussed what occupational therapy is and how beneficial it can be to many children. And today we wanted to focus a little bit more about school readiness, and what that looks like, and ensuring that we're doing everything we possibly can to prepare our children for the transition to big school. So from an OT's point of view, what does school readiness mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think as we've discussed before, every child is so unique.
Yes.
So it does really look a little bit different for each family, but quite broadly, I think there's three main areas that we like to think about when we're preparing for school. So school readiness is a term that really is quite broad, but I think often we really think about it just as the child, as an individual, and of course that's such an important factor. But in addition to that, I think preparing our family unit for a child transitioning to school, and then taking it that one step further, even more preparing the school and preparing the community for that transition as well. For some children that may be a little bit smoother, and it may just be about preparing our uniform and our resources.
Right.
For other children that may need a little bit more support, it's about checking in with that school beforehand and finding out what supports are available and how to access those.
And the same for the family unit. I know when my first son started school, it was, I had worked, in schools for so long and assumed I would do it so easy, and just like having a baby, where I thought I'd do that so easily, having worked with children for so many years, and it really wasn't. That it is a huge step from an early childhood setting to school, and so it really is preparing the family unit. And I know that even in our setting, we changed our curriculum quite a bit a few years back, where we focused a lot on some of the routines at school. So things like how the canteen works, and what a school assembly looks like, what sports carnivals are like, which, years back we didn't focus on those things, but that's what my child found overwhelming, because I remember him saying, I go outside and the teachers don't play with me, or I don't know what to do outside. And so it was, some of those routines were so important to try and teach the children. Yeah,
it certainly is. I think even on, as you said, that really practical level as well, who's going to be able to drop off and pick up in those really set structured times? Is there before school and after school care? Do I need to enroll my child in those programs, and what kind of policies and other paperwork is associated with that?
And talking to the children about how that's all going to run, and finding that spot where you'll be standing to pick them up, so they're not anxious when school ends. I do remember week 2 ringing my husband and saying, I'm homeschooling, I'm qualified, I can homeschool, I can't do this. It was so emotional for me, because I had been spoiled at Fit Kids, having I employed their teachers here, and all of a sudden I just had to hand. It's probably how all of you feel when you leave your babies with us for the first time. That was for me when school started, so it can be really overwhelming. And we talk a lot about how important that social and emotional development is, rather than that can they, their ABCs and all those academic skills. We really want to make sure that social and emotional development is there. Yeah,
that's right. I think there's obviously a lot of research and things going into our education systems in Australia. We're so lucky to have such a quite high quality education system, but the information that is coming back is that in that, particularly that first year of schooling, all the educators are saying it is those social skills, those emotional skills, and the really practical, functional skill building that plays into those children's success in that first year. Of course, those literacy and numeracy skills are also important, but unless our child is able to, attend to their teacher and attend to their work and feel safe,
and ask for help,
ask questions, exactly, they're not going to be able to build those skills. So certainly working on those social, emotional, and really practical.
So what can our families do at home to prepare children for school in that way, when it comes to social and emotional first?
Certainly. Well, I think certainly by having some kind of external early education support. So obviously we've got our fantastic Fit Kids mainstream centres, simple things like going to your local library and seeing what community opportunities there are for children to experience that group setting and to experience that structured day, outside of the home. in addition to that, thinking about things like, is my child able to recognise their own school bag, their own lunchbox? So, you know, getting those things early and sending that same lunchbox to preschool, to daycare, having it at home and practice opening them and closing them, and can you find yours, and which one has your name on it? Those really, really functional skills that will carry over to the school.
So, and it is surprising, simple things like that, when we implemented Lunchbox Week at the centres, because we were hearing about children starting school and eating all their food at recess and then starving, or not being able to open packets. So it was, it's that, and for me it's always about building a child's confidence. And so if they get to school, even if they know their alphabet and all their numbers and they've worked on all that side of things, if they can't do some of those skills, it really rocks their confidence and really has a negative effect on their transition to school. So that sort of stuff is important. We do start some of those numeracy and literacy working on those skills here in the centre, and the children really show an interest in it. And again, it helps build their confidence, because if they've got an understanding of that, the curriculum does move quickly once they get to school. So it's about finding the balance, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. I think, as you said, that balance is just so important. I think naturally, you know, in these years leading up to school, kids do become really interested in numbers and letters, and they want to know more about it. So certainly engaging them in that way and making these activities really fun and really functional. You know, simple things when you're out in the community, pointing at street signs, finding the number on your letterbox, and learning about our letters and numbers in that way can be so beneficial.
And counting the leaves outside rather than the plastic counters, and trying to, you know, I know for my boys I really had to get creative about trying to work on that, so because they weren't interested in the typical, you know, they would get bored so easily. And I know our educators in the centres are so creative about implementing those skills without the children even understanding they're doing maths, or you know, it's cooking. You know, one of the favourite things for our children to be doing is cooking, and there's so many skills that come into play there. So it's really valuable to find that balance for the two. And we typically have our school readiness nights at the centres, but given the environment at the moment, we haven't been able to do that. So we will be putting out a school readiness little video with further details for all our families soon, and the documentation. Some of you have already got our school readiness packs too, which has got a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information in there. So check those out, and you'll get a video soon. And as always, if you're concerned about, I know we do have families that get to a point they're not quite, depending on their birthdays as well, not quite sure whether their child is ready for that step to school. And sometimes we have families that, because the children have all those academic abilities and they're confident in that area, they think they're going to get bored, but it really is ensuring that the child has the social and emotional development to transition. So speaking to educators and reaching out if we need help. We do have families that will reach out to OTs for extra support in the lead up to school or as school starts. So what are some of the things you would work on, or some of the issues that you see arise for some of our littlies when they're getting ready for school?
Well, I think, as we said, it's looking at that really holistic approach, and while valuing the academic side is certainly important, looking at those really practical skills underlying as well. So through the foundation in our lead up to our children transitioning to school, and the children that we work with in the mainstream centres as well, we're often looking at those really early pre-writing skills, as we discussed in the previous tea time, being able to hold a pencil and complete a drawing, and recognising that different shapes come together to form a picture. That really plays into when we do begin writing at school, different shapes also come together to form a letter, which comes together with more letters to form a word. So developing those early skills, and simple things. Are we able to sit at a table for a few minutes at a time and complete a task until the end, so when it's in front of us? Are we able to follow simple instructions given to us by our teachers and follow through with those tasks? I think waiting and turn taking is such an important one for our social skills. There's so much waiting in kindergarten, and it can be really challenging. So working on that ability to regulate yourself while there's no direct structured task in front of you.
And that's a big step for children. They're, you know, in our setting, there can be up to 4 or 5 educators in a classroom, and they work so hard to know the children so well.
Yes.
But then when they get to school, they're big classrooms with one teacher, and so sometimes those children that struggle with those issues, they can sort of automatically become labelled as a difficult child, or they don't. The teachers just simply don't have the time to implement some of these things that we can do all day, every day, and that's a fear for me. That, you know, we need to ensure that we are doing all we can before we get there, before we step into a kindergarten class, because as I said, the curriculum just moves so quickly. We need to have those foundational skills there, so children adapt as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's really important that if we have some concerns that continue on to that transition to school, that we have a relationship with the school before day one.
Yeah.
So reaching out and speaking, and I know that some of the therapists from the foundation will go into schools and work with teachers as our children transition.
Yeah, I think a lot of our local schools, we're really lucky in that they're so open to being collaborative with us prior to that transition and during that transition as well. So reaching out to your early childhood educators, reaching out to your primary school as well, and if necessary, you know, opening up that communication pathway between both of those education facilities that are going to be supporting your child through that transition. There's obviously a lot of you know, school orientation and school tours and meetings and things that you can have to get to know the environment and get to know your learning support staff and your principal.
And I know so many of our wonderful local schools will encourage more orientations for a child that might be struggling a little bit. So we've got, it's, you know, typically it's only a couple of visits to the school as a group the year before school starts, but the schools have been wonderful in allowing our families to go in and spend a little bit of extra time if necessary, if we're worried about what that transition will look like.
And even those little incidental ways that you can boost that for yourself, you know, driving past the school on the way to the shops, or taking the long way home to drive past and point out, this is where I'll drop you off, and this is where Dad will pick you up, or you'll get on the bus, and I can see the classrooms, and can you see the playgrounds, just to make that environment really familiar.
Too. And we've got to remember that there's that big break over Christmas, so we do all those orientations, you know, often in November, and then it's a long time before they start school. So doing those drive-bys and talking about it and is really important over that Christmas break too, when we can get busy with so many other things. It's important that we keep, because they're very excited when they go for their orientations, and then it's all brand new for them, you know. And I know my son said, he was at school for 2 weeks, he said, I'm done now, I think I'll go back to Fit Kids. So they need to get used to it, and it takes a little while for everyone to settle in, and we often hear about them thinking it's just a little holiday and it's time to go back to Fit Kids. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Jess.
No problems.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Perfect.
Easy.
Great job. Was there anything I missed that you wanted to say?
I don't think so. I think we covered.
I'm just looking at your notes.
I didn't specifically identify about the OT screeners. I don't know if you wanted us to tie that in a little bit more explicitly.
I might just let's record just a little bit that I'll cut in about that, because I did that with the speech as well. So so I'll say that, just as Jill and I spoke about with our speech screeners, we're also going to have screeners for OT. So if you could, and then I'll ask you what that would include, what you would do in a screener, and who should reach out.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. We at Fit Kids, we will be having OT screeners, just as we do with our speech therapy. Jill and I spoke about that a few weeks ago, so we're going to do the same thing with OT. So in a screener, what would that involve? What would you do for that?
Yeah, so at the moment we've put together a few different activities, being occupational therapy, and the same as Jill would be doing with speech. Our screeners are very play-based, so a lot of our children will just be thinking that we're playing games together and having lots of fun, but we'll be having a look at some of those underlying skills that we talked about, our fine motor, our gross motor, our play skills, our engagement skills, and those self-regulation skills as well.
Great. And just with the speech, the educators may speak to parents if they have any concerns.
Yeah.
And if a parent has concerns, they can speak to us as well. Is there anything that we should, a family should be looking out for at home, or any, who should reach out if they've got issues?
Well, I think, as we said before, if there's any kind of area that you are concerned about, as we said in your first step, reach out to your educator and see if there are concerns in that area in the early education setting as well. You might be able to find out a little bit more if children at that age are also having similar difficulties, or perhaps your child might need a little bit more support in that area. So certainly reach out to the early educators or reach out to the foundation, and we can have a chat and see if one of those screeners might be suitable.
Good. And as we said last time we spoke, we talked about that might mean, for same with speech, for some families or some children, it's just a couple of sessions or a little bit of help and some strategies for families to implement. Others it might be a little bit more, but it's, so every child will be different. Every child's sort of program or what they'll need to do will look different.
Exactly.
But as we always say, get in early. Early intervention is the key. Thank you.